Good afternoon, everybody. Really excited to have you here. Second day of CriblCon. Woo!
Home stretch.
All right, Hi, I'm Emily. I am a customer advocate here at Cribble. I've been with Cribble for 3 years, but before I joined Cribble, I was a lead content engineer at a large insurance company. My job was primarily developing content with our incident handling team.
And I'm Anna Casey. I lead the UX research team here at Cribble. I've been here for 2.5 years. Prior to that, I've been doing UX research in the data and analytics space for the better part of 10 years. So we're excited to talk to you today. We want to dive into some research methods and some strategies to help you strategically tweak your development process as a data engineer toward better outcomes. Those outcomes being time savings for you, ultimately, an improvement to your end user satisfaction and to the adoption of the solutions that you create. So let's talk about the challenge. The businesses that we support are often described as having 3 pillars: people, process, and technology. And as builders and those with more developed technology skills, we often associate ourselves with that technology pillar. And sometimes we minimize our consideration or our association with the people in the process. Sometimes we don't want to talk to people. But the solutions that we create, they're technology-based. We're wrangling data. We're handling the storage, the collection, the processing, the analysis piece. And the technical challenges that we have to negotiate are non-trivial. But we've also experienced frustration in delivering solutions that don't get used or are constantly in a state of rework or iteration and flux, and no one's using it and no one's happy. So today we want to challenge you to think of technology in a different way. While still paramount to the success of your businesses, we'd argue that technology is more foundational, especially within security, IT, and observability. The technology is there as that foundational layer to support and solve problems for the people and processes that govern the business. So this is why focusing on the code isn't enough, and why our data solutions often fail when we forget to dig deep to understand the people and the processes that they need to support and advance.
So let's talk about a classic example. A ticket lands in our queue. I need a report showing X. Create a dashboard showing Y. We see the request, we understand the technical ask, and we immediately get to work. We're great at this, right? We're problem solvers. We dive deep into the technical specifications and start writing code. It's what we're trained to do. In addition, we're overwhelmed by the number of tickets. Time is a limited resource, and people should ask for what they need. So we produce the ask to meet the specifications in the ticket. But what happens when you spend hours, days, or even weeks on a project? You deliver a perfectly functional, technically sound solution, only to find the requester says, "This isn't what I needed." All that time and effort, it feels wasted. How many of you have experienced that before? Yeah, it sucks. The data might be accurate, but the solution itself is useless to the person who asked for it, especially because you know it's going to stay in your queue while you and the user figure out what it is they actually wanted.
Great solutions are most often born from an understanding of the full scope of the problem, but the reverse is not always true. Every day we're pitched tools that list out impressive technical specs, but once we try them out, we find that they've overpromised and underdelivered when it comes to impacting the outcomes that we actually care about. And this is in large part because the builders of those tools lacked the context on the full scope of the problem they're trying to solve. So let's explore a new way. It's easy to understand why we dive so quickly into the details of the technology. We are builders, we are solution-oriented, and as humans, we're biased towards focusing on what we already understand and can control. So when someone comes to us with a request for a solution, it's easy to immediately focus on the what of the technology. In my world, in software development, These are called feature requests. How many of you have submitted a feature request in the Cribble community Slack channel? Awesome. We love feature requests. But I have this idea for a blog post titled, "Feature requests are a real problem," because they're often a signal. They're a signal that there's a problem our customers are trying to navigate and trying to overcome. And the solution they've presented is in their attempt to solve that problem. But we shouldn't build it without further investigation into the problem that motivated the request. So as the ones who control the technology, it's likely that we have a better handle on the art of the possible when it comes to the solution. But just as our users may be limited in their understanding of the back-end possibilities, we are limited in our understanding of the context, the people and the processes that our solutions will need to exist in and to deliver within. So while it's counterintuitive, as builders and owners of the solution, our focus initially should actually be to dive in, to understand the people and the processes that our solution will serve. So to do this, we can think like researchers and utilize strategic questioning to dig into the why. Today, we'll talk about a few strategies and research methods that'll help you to do just that, because getting the data right is only half the battle. Understanding the user's context, their goals, their actual needs is the other half of it, and it allows us to deliver solutions that people will actually use.
So let's walk through an example. We have this ticket to create a mean time to respond or mean time to resolution report. What they ask for is a number. We could just give them a number and be done with it. But this is the core of the problem. We often focus on the what the ticket says, what data is needed. But what if we paused for a minute and asked a different question? What if we asked why? How? Why does the user need this report? Why is the data important to them? How will you use this data? How do you generally consume data? After asking some of those questions, they might reveal that they're trying to figure out areas to improve their response time and what things are taking longer to respond to. Now we know they don't just need a number. They need a breakdown of the MTTR, a way to see responder activity, and perhaps a way to flag it for follow-up. This is a much better solution to their actual problem. Once we have a solid understanding of the why and how, our work still isn't done. We need to embrace an iterative approach. Instead of a single big reveal at the end of a project, we should be getting feedback constantly. This is a core part of building a great user experience. You'll see in the develop stage 3 concepts: discovery, prototyping, and user feedback. Strategic questioning relies on these concepts and can help you build better products, whether that is a dashboard, a data pipeline, an onboarding experience for your data, and have happier users. By taking time to ask better questions, we get 2 massive benefits. First, we deliver solutions that truly meet our users' needs, which leads to higher satisfaction and adoption. Second, we save a ton of time. By building the right thing the first time, we avoid endless rounds of revisions, rework, wasted effort. It's a win-win.
So let's talk about discovery and break it down a little bit more. In discovery, we're putting on our lab coats, we're grabbing our black-rimmed glasses, we're engaging our curiosity, and we're thinking like researchers. In this role, we're not afraid to ask questions, even the dumb ones. We're listening more than we speak. We're listening not to respond, we're listening not to solution on the fly. In discovery, we're just sponges, and we're listening to understand. How many of you have participated in UX research with me or one of my colleagues before CriblCon? How many of you came by the booth today? So one of the other things that I do in discovery is I test my assumptions. And so every time I've interviewed one of you, I've probably asked 1 or 2 questions that I thought I knew the answer to. But I do that because every once in a while, you surprise me. And I learn something, a really compelling insight that changes the way that we approach building product. The other thing that we want to do once we have the attitude of learning and listening is we want to walk away with 3 things. These are our goals. We need to understand who the user is, what the problem they're trying to solve is, and what success means to them. In terms of who the user is, that could be one or many people. So we want to ask questions that helps us get to the bottom of that. One or many roles. In terms of the problem, we want to look at the kind of workflow that they have today. If they have an existing solution to the problem, we want to dig in there. And then finally, success. This is how they would describe success in solving the problem. It includes some kind of change to their experience or their business. So this could be improving our visibility into the sticking points in our process so that we can continuously improve our ability to respond. That might be success. You'll definitely want to get a better understanding of the technology, tools, and data in discovery, but my advice is to start with these 3 things as your guidepost. And finally, it's also worth considering if you've never done a round of interviews or discovery just to get to know your end users, decoupled from a ticket, decoupled from a request, so you can understand the variety of work that they do, the variety of data products that they encounter or tools that they use. And investing some time to do this foundational discovery will help speed up this part of the process when you do have a ticket that you need to address. So the interview itself, it's equal parts art and science despite the title of this. And we've talked about the attitude and the goals, so now I'll share some of my playbook for how I approach interviews and how I structure my line of questioning. At a high level, these are the things that I think about. I start broad to narrow. And as I narrow in, I'm filling in context, I'm adding color. I take the opportunity to get clarity. If I think that there's something more there to someone's response, I dig in. And finally, I reflect back. This ensures that you have the opportunity to get on the same page while you have the user in the room to make sure that your understanding of their problem matches their understanding of their problem. So to give a little more for you to take away in terms of the types of questions I ask or I think about in each of these, for broad to narrow, for those of you who have participated in research sessions with me, I will ask you about your role and how you use Cribble. And I ask it every time. So some people who have been in interview sessions with me might wonder why I ask this again and again and again. And it's because it situates our conversation in your current status of your work. What matters to you and what's important to you often comes out there. From there, I'm diving in to fill in that context. So who will use the solution? What workflow or process? What are they trying to accomplish? Why is it important to them? And then on this matter of whether it's replacing an existing solution or not, if there's a solution already being utilized, this is a great opportunity to naturally progress into another research method we use. We call it contextual inquiry, but it's really just observing. So asking someone to pull up the tool, see how they use it, dig in to understand their motivations, their pain points, their intentions as they go to help you correct some of the things that aren't working for them today. So whether you're doing a standard interview or you're doing that contextual inquiry, it's really important to ask clarifying and probing questions when your spidey senses start to tingle. So if you think there's something more behind a response someone gives you, you can ask questions like, can you tell me more about that? What do you mean by X, Y, Z? And again, don't be afraid to ask dumb questions. You don't build expertise by pretending you know something. Finally, the reflecting back. I usually make a statement like, so what I'm hearing is you need A, B, C for this to meet your need. This gives them the opportunity to tell me I'm wrong. I can test my synthesis, and while there's still time to clarify with the user. It's better to know now before you start writing code if you've missed anything. And finally, I recommend sending an email after the interview to summarize what you've learned and set expectations that you're going to check in with them as you start to iterate, as you start to prototype, and you'll reach out when you have something to share with them.
So next, let's talk about iterative development. It's been a long day. Iterative development is a cyclical process for creating products. It involves building, testing, and refining. While primarily related to product management and software development, the same concepts can be applied to data engineering. The core idea is simple. Don't try to build the final product all at once. Instead, break it down into manageable chunks, those iterations. This approach is all about managing risk. Do you remember all that time we wasted because we built something off of a ticket that didn't suit a need? Yeah. We're ensuring we're building the right thing. A prototype is an early functional draft of your product or specific feature. It doesn't need to be polished. It just needs to demonstrate the core functionality or concept you want to test. Once you have a prototype, you move immediately into the second and arguably most critical phase, user feedback. This is where we put the prototype in front of users and observe how they interact with it, ask questions, gathering their thoughts and pain points. When we take that feedback, we then take that feedback, use it to refine the prototype and start the cycle over. This continuous loop is the engine of iterative development, which increases the likelihood of success and minimizes wasted effort. So, how do prototypes relate to data engineering? By using prototyping, you start building a preliminary mock-up so that you can visualize and test ideas before committing significant time and money to full development. A great prototype captures the essence of the user experience without needing the full underlying engineering. So let's go back to that MTTR report example. After asking questions, you know they are looking for a view to understand mean time to respond and break down where time is being spent. As the data engineer, you know the technical options available to you, but before spending the time to develop that specific solution, you want to show what it would look like. So you spend 15 minutes drawing it on a piece of paper just to make sure that you can test your assumptions and reaffirm that you are on the same page as your user as early as possible. Prototyping should be fast, focused, and iterative. You're going to want to define your goal, understand what you're trying to, what questions you need answered, what you're trying to figure out. Build it quickly, use the simplest tools necessary, and then get it in front of your users as fast as possible. When we talk about using the simplest tools necessary, fidelity plays in. Low fidelity is going to be that paper and pencil, just draw it out, I think it's gonna look like this. High fidelity is gonna look and feel like your final product. In a lot of cases, when I was at my prior job, I would start with writing really inefficient searches in a dashboard to try to get an idea of what people were looking for. I'd start putting those panels in. They'd be so slow because they were never efficient. But they'd start giving me feedback very quickly. No, we actually want to break out like this. And once we got to the point where I was able to understand this is what the dashboard's going to look like, I went back and sped it up. I used summary searching. So I knew what fields were necessary, but if I had written summary searches to make it fast first, it would have been rework after rework. I would have had to keep adjusting the searches. The user experience wouldn't have been good. So the takeaway from prototypes really is when a decision about technology and what path to take will be hard to undo, prototyping is a great way to drive that conversation forward and get the information you need to choose a path.
So concept testing is the research method that we use to get feedback on a prototype. And in a concept test, our goal, as Emily mentioned, is to get answers to those open questions that will help determine how to move forward with the technology. It really gives both you and your end users confidence in what you're building and reduces the risk that the final solution will fall flat. So let's talk strategy for structuring a concept test. These are the things that I think about first and foremost: setting expectations. Set expectations about the level of fidelity. Tell them it's slow. Tell them what you're still working on and that you have specific questions that you're trying to get answers to help you move forward. Get them to think aloud. You want to bring that internal processing that people always do when they look at a picture or a diagram, and get them to speak out loud how they're processing. So you can say things like, describe to me what you're seeing. And then follow the intended workflow. Even if it's something that's very static, if you have a couple of images you need to kind of show them to imagine how it will work, show those in the order that you expect them to interact with them, so you can kind of simulate what it will be like when you finally get to full fidelity. And finally, use this opportunity to get a rough gauge on the success measure, so you can ask questions about their confidence. So let's look at some of those questions. In terms of setting expectations, you're reiterating those working assumptions: who the solution is for, how it will be used, and what success will look like. You're upfront about the level of fidelity, and you're making sure that they understand that you have specific questions so that you're getting the type of feedback on the parts of the prototype that you need. One of the things we sometimes encounter with design is that if it's really high fidelity, sometimes people will focus on colors, or whether it's a drop-down or a radio. And so you want to make sure that what you're presenting to them helps to elicit the feedback that you need and doesn't get into details that you don't want to talk about yet too soon. Then getting them to think aloud, right? Talk to me about how you imagine using this. Describe to me what you see. What are your initial impressions of this? But again, make it safe for them to give you critical feedback if they need to. This is a part of the process that I always really encourage my PM and design partners, like, let people tell you your baby is ugly, right? Sometimes it's hard to get people to give us critical feedback, but that's the feedback that helps us make the product better. It makes the outcomes better. And then following that intended workflow, I kind of already covered this, but you want to walk through that prototype according to the workflow that they described to you in discovery. It helps you test the assumptions that you had about their workflow. So if you need to reorder steps, or if you need to change the way something might be interacted with that you had planned out, this will also help you test at this stage. And finally, with measuring success, here I really like to use Likert-style questions. I'm a big fan of the 1 to 5 scale. So I'll ask, on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being not very confident, 5 being very confident, how confident are you that this is going to meet your needs? If someone tells me 2, I now have an opportunity to say, okay, what am I missing? What do I need to get to 5, right? Does it need to be faster? Do I need a different metric? But the provoked response helps you have a deeper conversation and lets you understand how far off the mark you are.
All right, bringing it home. So, finally, how do we know if we've succeeded? It's not just about delivering a bug-free report. Success is measured by adoption, happy users, and impact on business outcomes. We should be asking, did this solution solve the problem? Are people using it? And did it make their job easier? This approach of integrating discovery and iterative development isn't just a design best practice. It has tangible, measurable benefits for anyone's workflow. So, talking about success, first one, increased adoption. The absolute most direct measure of success is going to be if they're actually using it. Nobody wants this thing that they've worked on to sit on the shelf and not be used. Increased adoption justifies the engineering effort and confirms that the iterative process correctly identified a real need. Now, adoption tells us if people are using it. Sentiment tells us how they feel about using it. High user sentiment translates to a better reputation for your engineering team and makes data consumers more productive. But ultimately, our data work must translate into tangible business outcomes. We must connect the use of our data products to a downstream business result. This is the so what of data engineering. Demonstrating business value elevates the data engineering team from a cost center to a strategic partner. By focusing on these 3 metrics, we move beyond just measuring technical efficiency, and instead we measure the true organizational impact of our work. So, the next time you get a ticket, I challenge you to pause. Resist the urge to drive straight into the code. Instead, ask why, how. Take the time to understand the person and the process behind the request. If you have a question, ask the question. By doing this, we move beyond just being data providers. We become those strategic partners who deliver solutions that make an impact. This is a mutually beneficial approach. It is not a burden to incorporate this. Your users will get a data product that is genuinely useful and meets their specific needs, and you reduce the risk of building the wrong thing. Time spent on a short feedback session can save weeks of rework later. Then you'll be able to exceed expectations. By continually seeking feedback, you don't just meet the initial requirements. You often discover and build things that truly delight your users. When you ask your users or have them interact with a prototype, they often reveal needs they didn't know they had or articulate their problems better than they did on a static requirements document. And while we're using data engineering examples through this, these concepts can be applied in any field or role. You are the expert in your area, but understanding your users and their needs can take your outputs from merely functional to essential. Now, my little disclaimer here. You guys are the experts. While this process is powerful, you must use your judgment. You already know not every internal change or just a tweak here and there is going to need a full-blown paper prototype and user testing. Use your experience to know when the requirement is standard or when it's novel. Listen to that spidey sense, that gut feeling that tells you, oh, this is going to turn into a something. Integrate these concepts selectively and thoughtfully to maximize impact and not add unnecessary process overhead.
At Cribble, we prioritize user feedback within our product design and development process. And so we hope that you find value in incorporating some of these strategies we've shared into your own work. As you can see, there's a variety of methods that you can use to gather data from your users depending on where you are in your process or what your needs are. And we've really only briefly covered a few of them today. There's even more than are on this slide. But if you have questions and you want to learn more, Emily and I are always available to talk shop, to share our experience and expertise in doing work in this way. And we'll likely be releasing more in-depth content on some of these different methods with examples of how to apply them to your data engineering work in the future. So look out for those in the Cribble community and on socials. And so thank you so much for your time. We hope you're able to apply these strategies early and often in your process to become better data engineers.